Bonjour and welcome to the special edition of Almanac North. I'm Rita Karppinen, host of tonight's Core Conversation on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. Some may know me as the host of PBS North's Native Report. I've been passionate about telling the stories of our elders and those of our lost relatives across the country, and I'm honored to host the latest installment of Core Conversations, a show that looks quarterly at some of the biggest issues and topics in our region. It's an effort to dig deeper and educate viewers on these subjects. Tonight, our focus is on missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, and specifically looking at the root causes of this epidemic and what efforts are currently in place to put an end to the violence against Indigenous women and relatives. Tonight's broadcast will showcase expert perspectives from individuals raising awareness, working on intervention, and implementing change. This conversation will delve into the harsh realities of violence against Indigenous people. If you've been impacted by domestic violence, human trafficking, and gender-based violence, please take this moment as your content advisory. Before we begin our conversation, we'd like to take a moment to begin this program with a song from Oshki Gijik Singers.
Buju nindoe ma ganeduk, nitana gamokoin indigenicas magizi nindodem, nagajiwanong nindonjaba. We are Oshki Gijik Singers, and we're here to sing the Strong Woman song. And this song comes from Maggie Paul, who's from Canada. And when Maggie was working in a penitentiary up north, she made this song with the women who were incarcerated. They made this song to recognize their strength as they went through the difficulties of being in prison. While they were in prison, a riot broke out, and they sang this song. And during this time that they were singing, nobody was hurt. So this song has gained kind of legendary status across Turtle Island and is sung to recognize the strength that women carry and the strength that we have when we are together in groups.
Here to speak with us about the root causes of the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives epidemic and the importance of raising awareness is founder of Native Lives Matter Coalition and Duluth Indigenous Commissioner, Reen Ann Goodrich. Duluth Indigenous Commissioner, Phoebe Davis. Systems Advocate and Advocacy Coordinator Program for Aid to Victims of Sexual Assault, or PAVSA, Mac Mars. And Jennifer Hummerdinger, Operations Coordinator of the Mending of the Sacred Hoop. Welcome, thanks for being here. Reen Ann, in your advocacy, what have you witnessed as far as root causes of MMIR here in the Twin Ports?
In the Twin Ports, directly would be historically the oppression from colonization It's the impacts that we see today. Some of the very root causes of the epidemic is our domestic violence, our sexual assault, the boarding school era, how that's impacted generationally, intergenerational trauma, and the systems that hold the violence and the racism in place. That is manifested today in what we're seeing is an increase in our rural, along with our tribal, of our missing and our murdered Indigenous relatives. And that is the, we can, looking at violence from a different lens and really examining the root causes of the violence in this country is the chief contributors to the ongoing epidemic that's impacting Indigenous peoples here on Turtle Island. We're in the midst of a transformational movement that is looking at deeply into these root causes, targeting and identifying the root causes and redefining the understanding of the violence. And we see, I think here in the Twin Ports, one of the chief leading causes is the financial and housing insecurities. That is really pushing, and that is directly impacted from generational trauma, and we trace that back to the boarding school era and the colonization.
Thank you for answering. It's really important work. So I'm interested, Mac, how was working at PAVSA and studying the issue informed you on the gender-based violence intersections in the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives epidemic?
Well, it's been partially my work there and then partially my work on justice for Native people, where I keep like a master list of all the relatives from either Canada or the United States. I keep it up to date, and it's kind of revealed a lot of different things to me in terms of how the root causes are affecting us. So one of the major things that people don't know about St. Louis County is that we're one of the largest counties in terms of placing Indigenous children in out-of-home placement. And there were children that I worked with who I removed them from their parents when I was a social worker, and they were removed from their parents, and their parents went to boarding school. And so we're seeing the direct trickle down of these effects, and we're also seeing playing out with the vulnerabilities involved in resource insecurity. We see like a lot of people who have to put themselves at risk in order to meet those needs, whether it's like getting rides, like transportation is a huge barrier for people, and that's where they end up putting themselves at risk, is they have to rely on strangers, or you know, if they're in rural areas where there's no cab service, no bus service, they have to look to strangers to meet these needs, and that's where a lot of people are falling vulnerable. And a lot of our young ladies who are in foster care are also falling vulnerable to sex trafficking, because they're placed in a system where they don't really get much say in what happens to them. And then somebody else comes forward and offers them all these opportunities and all these resources that they otherwise wouldn't have. And so that kind of puts them in a position where, you know, their choice is either stay in the system where nobody listens to me, or go with this person who says that they will.
Yeah, so you're definitely seeing that generation to generation, that trickle-down effect. Phoebe, what efforts are effective when looking for these individuals?
Looking for the individuals?
Missing, murdered Indigenous relatives. Is there any type of strategies or tools that are effective to finding them?
I think social media has helped find some people, and people who have been, there's always, wherever you go on reservations, you'll see cork boards with missing people, and majority of them are women, and You see that when I saw that when I went to Bad River. I saw that when, I've been to other reservations.
Yeah, social media is such a powerful tool, along with word of mouth and just those physical spaces that we look at in our daily lives. Jennifer, in your work at Mending the Sacred Hoop, your organization focuses on eradicating violence against Indigenous women. What has been the main obstacle you've had to work against to help the women you service?
So no matter how much there is for resources, it's never enough. It's like a constant uphill battle. Even like the funding that a lot of the programs get, they have to jump through hoops to be able to utilize. And especially when we're working in Indigenous communities, like food and drink are cultural aspects, and the funding doesn't allow that. And so it limits like attendance, it limits our ability to do some of these gatherings and events. And also just with the direct service money, we come across so many people who are emailing us through our website that are needing immediate assistance money to get them out of these vulnerable situations. And there's so many programs that just don't have the money available. So I think funding and the financial piece is a huge barrier. And then also just as far as, education goes, I think there's a big gap in the education piece. I think a lot of the community wants to focus on certain victims over others. So when Phoebe was talking about social media, one thing that you'll find is that the social media posts for Indigenous missing folks is shared significantly less. I had done some research a few years ago with 2 missing people. One was Indigenous and one was white, and they went missing within 24 hours.
I think that's so important just to know the disparities.
Yeah.
And I think we can definitely delve into that as we further go along in this episode. Yeah. Thank you. Earlier this month, members of the community gathered together in prayer and song for the 9th annual May Day event to honor all missing and murdered Indigenous loved ones. This event got its start in Duluth when community member Babbitt Sandman dreamed that missing relatives were calling out from Lake Superior. Ever since then, flowers have been placed in Lake Superior to show respect to those individuals. Producer Megan McGarvey and videographer Owen Zabelny met with impacted families and community members to bring us this report.
This is the 9th annual event today, and it started back in 2014 when Babbitt Sandman had a vision of having a ceremony and putting flowers in the lake for the missing and murdered that perhaps had gone into the lake. The Indian community is very small, and so if one of us disappears, it affects all of us greatly. Personally, I knew Sheila St. Clair. Each year I hold a press conference to help keep her in the public eye. Other women that I've known have been murdered in the area. Lisa Isham, she was murdered by her boyfriend in 2015. Jackie Defoe and her son, they were also murdered. That was very tragic, and that was by a boyfriend.
We're here because my brother was murdered in St. Paul, and then he was brought out to Superior and dismembered, and then they came back over to the Minnesota side and dumped his remains in Grand Portage.
In a criminal complaint filed in Cook County late last week, 41-year-old Robert Thomas West from Duluth was charged with accomplice after the fact to felony murder and interference with a dead body or scene of death. The criminal complaint alleges West helped dispose of Balsamo's body and conceal the crime. The case against West was built on information from an informant who told investigators West allegedly told him that he had a dead body in the back of his truck and that the victim's body was chopped up inside a camper.
What they did to my brother was just, it was unnatural. They completely just treated him like he wasn't a person. And then to make matters worse, when we tried to find him, we didn't get much help. We didn't get much help from the police. We couldn't find help, so we hired our own private investigators. We came to Duluth and Superior to find my brother. We made sure that he came home to us, and we weren't going to stop until he did. It was pretty bad to find out that the police were okay with only recovering enough to identify Ricky from the water, so they would have left the bucket in the water knowing there were more. They just needed enough to identify him and obviously what had happened, the area that was shot. Luckily, Tom Crossman and the dive team was at Lake Superior dive team. They actually insisted. They went back and went and recovered the rest of his remains like a week or two later. They may have just left him there. If we left it up to the police, I don't think he would have ever been found. He would still be sitting in Lake Superior. It's really hard to come up here. Like, it's just that reminder of everything we had to go through, and then just the constant, just the way we were treated by the police and everything of the sort. It hurts. It makes your stomach turn as soon as you come over and you see the water. But at the same time, coming to an event like this, I feel like it's really good because it can give other families hope. The fact that they say Lake Superior never gives up its dead. Well, we found him, we did something that most people can't. And coming here for events like this is actually really important to give these other families hope that they can find their loved ones too.
As of the last few years, with anything, if you see something, say something. If something doesn't see right, report it immediately. If it's nothing, no big deal, but you could be saving a life.
Here to speak with us on challenges when investigating these cases and looking for lost family members are Reenann Goodrich, Mac Mars, and Duluth Police Chief Mike Sanoa. Welcome, thanks for being here. As detailed in that video piece, jurisdiction can make a huge difference in how these cases can be handled. Chief Sanoa, in your time in law enforcement, how difficult is it to search and recover someone when different jurisdictions are involved?
It can be difficult. As law enforcement agencies, we have a responsibility to take that missing persons report, even if we don't believe that person has ever been in our jurisdiction. So we have to take that information, get that person entered into NCIC so that other organizations can start looking, and then reaching out as part of our initial investigation. If we are able to determine where we think that last point of contact was, to get a hold of those agencies so that they are very much aware about this missing person case.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Duluth now has a community fund in place for those missing individuals such as Sheila St. Clair. How effective are reward funds when recovering a missing person?
I think that it helps, right? Different people are motivated by different things. Mm-hmm. I think for some people it's their heart that motivates them to come forward with information and tell us a story. And sometimes it's just the outreach from our community that has been keeping, for example, with Sheila, in the intention of our community, right? We're 2 or 3 events a year that we talk about Sheila intentionally. Mm-hmm. But I think there's other people, who see that potential for a monetary reward that can maybe improve their life and where they're at. And that might be just enough to get those last pieces of information that we need.
Oh, miigwech. Mac, you run the site Justice for Native People, a unique website where anyone can report new information on missing Indigenous individuals. How important is it to have community engagement on the site? Has it assisted anyone in recovering?
I have helped with one identification at the very least, because I also cover bodies that have gone unidentified, but they know that from DNA testing that they're Indigenous people. So there was a woman named Daisy Tallman who was missing, who wasn't in all of the national systems and who had just kind of been forgotten. And I found information about her on the internet, and I got it circulated to some of my friends and some of my retired police officer friends who can put them in those databases. And this last year we were able to get her identified, and now her body's going home.
Really
So
important work.
now in terms of reporting information to me, I discourage people from doing that. I put the agency who has that person missing, I put their information there, because as a third party, if I report it to them, it's not really gonna go many places, so they need to hear directly from that person who has the information.
Miigwech. Renan, how can community get involved in this issue?
Well, in the Twin Ports area, the community has been very involved. We have annual events that we center families with. We create those platforms for families to amplify their calls for the missing, for justice, and our events are grounded in culture and to promote healing. This year was the 8th annual Valentine's Day event and the 3rd annual National Day of Awareness. So our community is very involved. It's families in our community, in our families, our relatives, that when they have a missing person, it's families that are at the front line of the movement. They're the ones that are reaching out and sharing in social media. They're feeling more comfortable about coming forth and making those reports, and they're making those reports earlier, right away. We're letting them know that you can report those missing right away. So our community has become aware in the past. It's been almost a decade. There's been a lot of community education, a lot of outreach into the community, and our community is aware. So we are getting a lot of community engagement, especially when there's someone missing. And families are utilizing those social media outlets. They're powerful tools of communication, and families are at the front line doing that work, so they're engaged.
Yeah, definitely. From my experience, when there's something tragic that happens in our Indigenous communities, our communities band together and they really show up, and they show up for their families, for the individuals, just for everyone and whoever they may need. Talking about communities showing up, what type of resources are available for families here in the Twin Ports when they have a loved one go missing? And this is, please answer anyone that might feel the need to.
For the resources, families have become aware. They're woke. They're engaged. So when their families when a family member is missing, they're reaching out sooner. We're seeing that. They're reporting to those missing reports right away. And we work directly with families and the police department to help find those missing in our community. And we're getting that support in the community to help find them.
I think with the state MMIW commission, that's another resource that's available to our state within the Duluth community. There's ACO, Native Lives Matter, Mending the Sacred Hoop, PAVSA, Safe Haven. All of those are resources that are available to people who are experiencing these issues. So all of those groups have advocacy groups or advocates, or to help with families, maybe who are struggling, or who are, whether it's somebody who's going missing, or that you're starting to become worried about somebody because of some of the things that Mac talked about, other people approaching them with maybe better opportunities or enticing them into a negative lifestyle. We have groups to include PAVSA, Lifehouse, others that have resources for families experiencing some of those things.
Yes, thank you for including our community partners, because we have strong community partners. ACO, American Indian Community Housing, PAVSA, CASDA, we share those are our direct support providers, and so we have strong community nonprofit organizations too that families are able to reach out directly to. So, along with Native Lives Matter Coalition.
Definitely. So everybody that's viewing at home, the Duluth area, Twin Ports area, we have a lot of different resources available. You know, I really encourage everyone to, you know, get on the internet, ask your friends, ask your partners, ask your community members what these resources are, keep spreading the knowledge, keep talking about missing, murdered, and Indigenous relatives. Mac, did I miss any resources?
I would just say that, you know, prior to the internet, we had what was called the Moccasin Telegraph, which was just basically word gets around. And our telegraph these days is Facebook. And there are a lot of organizations available to circulate your information. If you get it to one of us, it's going to get to all of us because we're all working together. So.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Chimigwich for providing all those resources, and I'm really hoping that it helps someone that's watching it today. But we will talk more into the next panels. Miigwech.
Chimigwech.
The creation of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office was one of the mandates submitted to the Minnesota State Legislature by the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force. Today, that office is up and running as part of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. Producer Megan McGarvey and videographer Isaac Quick traveled to St. Paul to bring us this report.
Hearing other families come in telling their stories, dealing with in our own communities, it's something that never leaves you. You still hear the voices, you still see the faces in your sleep, in your working hours. It doesn't stop. And it won't stop, I don't think, until we don't see this happening anymore. It's far too important for us to address why Indigenous people are being murdered or disappear at such a high rate.
Like 1.1% of the population is all Native people. This is men and women, children, two-spirited people, all of them. Yet, Indigenous women account for the 9% of the homicide rate in Minnesota. I know it's not going to be easy to change systems. I mean, that's going to be the most difficult part. So you have to be in it for the long haul.
So I think we are a leader in that, you know, this is the first state-based office in the entire country. But I also think we have some of the largest disparities in the country. We don't ever want people to think, oh, well, we passed the task force, oh, the report is done, we did the office, now we have this task force that's part of the office or the advisory council, so, you know, we're all good. This is work that needs to continue to be invested in, regardless of the political affiliation of the person who sits in the governor or lieutenant governor's office.
These are issues that have gone on for far too long and needed to be addressed, and I'm glad that the state was able to finally step up. There's a huge distrust in the Indigenous community in regards to law enforcement. And we saw this happen again and again. A lot of families felt extremely dismissed, disregarded. There were issues of misidentification. And we saw that there was a huge lack of cultural competency, of understanding our way of life, and the importance of forging healthy relationships, understanding our communities and those in it.
We're a liaison between families and law enforcement to help them navigate the process. When a loved one goes missing or when a loved one is murdered, we try to facilitate a communication plan between law enforcement and the families. Understanding the process and then also just being listened to is very important. And I learned that in my career in law enforcement.
Jurisdictional issues are probably one of the most frustrating components with anything to do with MMIR. We look at situations such as Ricky Balsamo, murdered in one place, dumped in Lake Superior, and it becomes a nightmare, not only for the family members or those searching, but also for law enforcement. You have to have someone that steps up to take the lead on investigation. You have to have in place ways to prosecute when something happened in one place and the person was moved, whether alive or dead at the time, to another. So that to me is the most daunting thing of all. And we need more cohesiveness. We need more central coordination, which I hope will come through the MMIR office.
It took 500 years for us to get here. Now, how do we fix or undo, 500 years? We need access to the data before we can start analyzing. And that's been a little bit challenging. The data is in silos and it's in different areas. Anything that will help with MMIR in the country is important to share what we're learning and what we're doing with everybody so we can have an impact on MMIR. I am not proprietary on everything that I learn and everything that I do. We need to do something. We need to do more about this problem. And so just sharing the information we come across, I think that's important.
Literally every Native woman I know has been impacted by violence. The reason this is so important to me is because I'm a survivor and a child witness. So while we all have been impacted by violence in some way, I think the willingness of these survivors who have lost someone, the strength that they exhibit all the time is stunning to me, especially those who don't know what happened and can still continue to do this work and get up every day to make sure that what has happened to their family doesn't happen to anyone else is powerful. I also think a lot about the people who don't have anyone to claim them, who've been completely lost. Those are the folks that I feel like we have a real collective responsibility to honor them.
Anytime you're on social media and you see those alerts, by sharing them, you are helping. By keeping your eyes open, you're helping. By checking in your garages, your sheds, under your deck, you're helping. Everybody has a component that they can participate in a positive manner to help locate someone.
With the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Office up and running in St. Paul, it has already begun to make its impact across Minnesota. We are rejoined now by Renan Goodrich, Phoebe Davis, Mac Mars, Chief Mike Sanoa, and Jennifer Hummerding. Welcome and thank you guys for coming. In the piece, the Lieutenant Governor mentioned that although Minnesota is ahead of it with the task force in office, it also has some of the greatest disparities. Do you agree with this, and if so, why? Anybody want to tackle that question? Mac?
Could you restate the question, please?
Yep. In the video piece we just saw, Lieutenant Governor mentioned that although Minnesota is ahead of efforts with the task force being established in the office, Minnesota also has some of its greatest disparities. Do you agree with this?
I do, at least in terms of engagement with systems. Like Indigenous people are very overrepresented in engagement with systems, whether it be law enforcement or social services is another one. And I think social services is one of the starkest disparities that we see because, a quarter of the children who go into foster care are Indigenous kids. And that's at a rate 18 times higher than everybody else. So I think that, while we are at the forefront of addressing some of the issues, but some of the issues are going to be systemic as well. And so we have to pull in people from other areas and be willing to work together.
Renan, do you agree that Indigenous people and the disparities are just vastly different for our community up in Duluth, in this region? So do you think that Minnesota has some of the greatest disparities in regards to missing, murdered Indigenous relatives?
I think Minnesota has huge disparities with people of color. And we're seeing that in the, with the new formation of the task force for missing and murdered African American Black women. That's just been created here this month in our biannual omnibus report. We do know from research tells us too that 8 to 9% of the missing and the murdered in the state of Minnesota are Indigenous women. So we see the disparity, the huge disparity within our social systems that work in our communities, directly with our communities, and are in support. And we also see these huge disparities in the data and the number. We are finally getting some data and current research here in the last couple of years. And we have the research data and numbers specifically addressing here in the state of Minnesota, and that would be with the Minnesota Task Force report. And so I encourage the community to please read that report, get familiar with that. You're able to download that right from the Department of Justice on the website with the state. And a lot of work has gone into that report. So we're blessed by having that data and some current research that backs up these claims that we've claimed for many years about this huge disparity of violence and with our Indigenous people, but also with our women of color too, and our communities of color. So.
Phoebe, since the opening of MMIR office, have you been in contact or worked with the office? And how can you guys work together to stop this epidemic?
With the office, we met at the Capitol with Alicia Kozlowski, and let's see, we talked with the House for the Gagigay Mikwendegozewag, and that means they are remembered forever. We've been working behind the scenes as I've been working as a grassroots organizer, so I'm not connected to anywhere other than Native Lives Matter. So
I wanted to thank you, Phoebe, for your awesome testimony, and that was March 3rd at the House. We were invited to come down and please testify in support for that Gagigay Mikwendegozewag program, to reward fund program that's local here in Duluth, to support its growth to the state level. And that was testimony that you provided, working directly with the director. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you from the City of Duluth Indigenous Commission. Miigwech.
Jennifer, as we see from the MMIR movement, we notice that the charge has been led by mostly women and Two-Spirit folks who have been victims of gender-based violence as well. In your opinion, what is it about these folks that compel them to continue in this work when they may have trauma of their own?
I think for a lot of people, it is part of the healing process. For a lot of us, it's also a way to take the power back. I do want to see more men involved. It's nice to see men up here. There needs to be those conversations had in families and those core units. But yeah, from what I have seen and with the women that I work with and the Two-Spirit individuals that I work with, it's definitely a huge piece of the healing and taking the power back.
So it's really important that we continue to bring all the community members, no matter who it is, youth, adults, however you may identify, really to charge this issue and bring awareness for sure. I appreciate that. Mac, do you have any comments on that last question about why folks that may have trauma of their own do this work?
I think that Jennifer stated it perfectly, that a lot of people, this is how they reclaim a piece of themselves that was lost or a piece of their family by helping other families. I mean, that's a very Indigenous thing to do, is, to reach out through your own pain and lift other people up and support them through the same thing. So gathering as a community, whenever there's a tragedy of any kind on the reservation, we gather as a community to support each other. So.
This is a reoccurring theme on tonight's core conversations, is that we're connecting through community. We show up through community. And that's one way that that our Indigenous communities do, and that they do consistently. They show up. Across the United States, May is Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Awareness Month. All month long, community leaders have been holding events here in Duluth to bring awareness to this national issue. Men as Peacemakers held an event that focused on an activity of healing by listening to survivors of gender-based violence and using butterflies to give the names of those murdered and missing in a new life in a visual window display. Producer Megan McGarvey and videographer Lance Havisto bring us the story.
Spaces like this really help me to feel safe, and I feel like that is one of the most important things when asking a survivor or somebody to speak on issues like this, is that feeling of safety. So I'd just like to thank for having this beautiful space today. I am a survivor of trafficking, and I was groomed into trafficking via Facebook. I met a man on Facebook who, made me believe like we were in a romantic relationship, and I ended up being trafficked to Las Vegas. And the minute I got there, I really quickly realized what was going on and what the situation was and how dangerous it was for me to be there. While I was there, I suffered a lot of abuse and exploitation. My family didn't know what was going on because we were told to put on a fake facade for social media. So I would post pictures of myself on Facebook looking like I'm having a good time. But in reality, as soon as that post went up, my phone got taken away. It was very difficult. I got locked into a room for 5 days, Las Vegas heat, 115 degrees outside, no air conditioning, where I was beat for 5 days straight. And after that, my mouth, I had my head smashed into a wall so many times that my mouth couldn't open. And I think about it now and I look back on that now and I really realize that that is truly when my voice was silenced. I literally could not speak. For me, coming out of that situation and coming home was the hardest part of it. And I think that's something that we are collectively working on as, Indigenous peoples and allies across the country and in Minnesota to provide safe healing spaces for survivors and safe healing spaces for families who still have loved ones missing or who've had loved ones murdered.
Hearing victims and survivors' perspectives on what's actually happening and what they've actually experienced is so crucial for healing and awareness. When looking at nonviolence through gender equality and looking at how we're all connected as a community, we need to look at all of community. and not just people that look like us, not just people that talk like us, not just people that identify, because every single member in the community is part of the ecosystem. And quite unfortunately, a lot of times Native voices are silenced.
With the butterflies for this event, I think that it is so profound and it's so beautiful in the way that it's going to be displayed. And I hope that the people of Duluth really stop and look at it and do more than look at it. You know, look at it and take it in. Take in and look at what you're feeling on the inside when you're looking at it. Because those feelings of sadness that you're feeling are multiplied by the millions to the families. It's the sadness that really plagues this community when we talk about these issues. And so shifting the narrative from sadness to what can we do to promote healing.
These are not people that ran away. These are people who are loved. These are people who are missed. And in many cases, they're feeling invisible. If one person who is missing saw this, saw their name was included, knew that they were loved, and knew, no matter where they were and what their situation was, they were not alone, that people cared for them, and they are not invisible.
I still struggle very much with PTSD from what happened to me in my lifetime. And it's really important to know that there are people that you can reach out to. And I have my own safe people. You know, if I'm having a hard day, I'll call my mentors or I'll call my older aunties that I can rely on. Because I don't think anybody should suffer alone.
We are rejoined by our previous panelists to speak more on the future of the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives epidemic here in the state of Minnesota. So what was interesting that I just learned right now is that folks on this stage right now they're all connected. And we're connected through MMIR, we're connected through the location of where we live, but we're also connected through a program. So I was hoping that we would have some time to talk about that. Phoebe, do you want to start?
Okay, wonderful.
All right.
Yes, we are all connected. Phoebe's with the City of Duluth, Mending the Sacred Hoop, Native Lives Matter Coalition came together to create a first of its kind grassroots collaborative with City of Duluth, with our supporting nonprofit Mending the Sacred Hoop. It's the first of its kind in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah. And Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people are far more likely to experience violence, be murdered, or go missing. Missing more than other demographic groups in Minnesota. Other Indigenous women make up just 1% of the state's population from 2010 to 2018. 8% of all murdered women and girls in Minnesota were Indigenous. Between 2012 and 2020, 27 to 54 Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit people, were missing any given month. And that's the Minnesota MMIW Task Force report to the Minnesota legislature.
So coming together as a collaborative, it's the first of its kind where there's families that are at the foundation of the MMIW movement here, especially in the Twin Ports area. They're very active. Working with grassroots, local grassroots, boots on the ground, collaborating with the city to create this first of its kind in the state of Minnesota, Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag Reward Fund program. The Reward Fund was inspired by our open active case of missing Sheila Sinclair in 2022, and I think that was in the month of January. And with the intent that it would be able to expand and to include multiple jurisdictions, and we're so honored that the state is picking up and helping to support. We've had recent growth of the Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag Reward Fund program to create the first state reward fund program in Minnesota. And the name of the program is Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag. So we're really excited about this recent news. It was signed by the governor on this month on the 19th, I think. So we'll see more jurisdictions being added to that. And currently, the Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag, we're focused on the open case with Sheila St. Clair, because that's the only open case that we have, that there is with the city of Duluth. So it's always been the intent with the and the encouragement, the growth of the program to include multiple jurisdictions, tribal jurisdictions, to be able to include across the state. So with this growth of the becoming a statewide reward fund program that will be administered with the MIR office, we're able to offer rewards for the missing across jurisdictions. Right now we're looking for the missing Sheila St. Clair in Duluth, but once the Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag program becomes a statewide, we're able to go across jurisdiction so that we're able to offer rewards for multiple missing cases that are outside of our jurisdiction. The one that we're focusing on is the missing Nevaeh kingbird from the Duluth area. So Chimikwech. So we have some exciting growth of the local homegrown reward fund that was created right here in the city of Duluth.
That's incredible. How can viewers at home learn more about this program? Is there a website that they can learn more about?
Oh, absolutely. We are, for the local Duluth Gagige Mekwenda Goziwag program, we have reward fund links that folks are able to donate to. Please go to Mending the Sacred Hoop website page. There's the donation link there. The reward is, the fund is being held with our nonprofit Mending the Sacred Hoop. So you can find out more information there, linked directly off of Native Lives Matter Coalition webpage or Mending the Sacred Hoop webpage. And please, please donate if you're able to, and share out into your social media networks. Chimikwech.
That's great. So everybody at home, go check out that program, share it on social media. Let's get some traction on here. I think when we start having these conversations, one thing that the viewers can take at home is bringing this to your local leaders, your state leaders, your county leaders, all the way up. I mean, it starts from the groundwork to the highest office that we need to, continue to talk and make noise until they hear us. And that's what I think that a lot of our ancestors have done before us too. So we really appreciate hearing about the reward fund, and we look forward to seeing how it evolves.
Yes.
Thank you to our guests for sharing their time and expertise on our show tonight. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch it on our website, pbsnorth.org. If you and a loved one is in need of help regarding domestic violence or human trafficking, please call the number on your screen. We'll end the program with one more song from the Oshki Gijik Singers. From all of us here at PBS North, thank you for watching. Good night.
Kitchen